This is your first country album for quite a number of years, and I remember the very first time we spoke, you mentioned it would be something that you would like to do again one day. When did you know the time was right?
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know I actually was thinking about it before I thought about it, but I don't know. It's David Less, who is one of the co-heads of Memphis International Records, is just this wonderful guy that loves to let me do, whimsical things. I did my Live from Cell Block D, the Live from the Prison record for them. And I just called him one day and said, I think it's time for me to do another country record. And he said, great. So it was just kind of a whim one day, and they bit. So kind of that's how I operate, unfortunately.
Yeah. Have you also felt a need to step back from the blues-orientated material you've been doing in recent years?
Yes, I have to admit that's true. I've never been completely comfortable in the blues genre. I love that music. There are certain tunes I love doing, but I just kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed to do blues. And there's only so much a white Norwegian from Wisconsin can do with that. And I had been touring with a big kind of review, the Chicago Blues Reunion. And, that was all solid blues. We were doing blues festivals. And quite frankly, I was just tired of hearing white people do blues, myself included. And I thought, I just want to sing some songs where they're just songs, nice melodies. I didn't have to, be conscious of not sounding like a white Norwegian from Wisconsin. And, I just picked out a bunch of songs that I really would like to do, and a great many of them, when I was thinking about this, were country tunes. So I thought, well, why not? That first one was fun. This one should be too. I also wanted to see if I could still sing, nominally pretty, which at 62 is a big trick. So that was my challenge.
No, I've got to tell you, you are singing better than ever. Are you a subscriber to the theory that the singing voices can be like a fine wine and can get better with age?
To a point.
Yeah.
And where I feel that's, I don't have the purity of tone I had when I was 19, but I had got an awful lot of that I didn't have when I was 19. It certainly balances out at the point where I feel like I'm just not singing better, then I will stop singing.
Yeah.
But I don't feel I'm in any danger of that for a while yet.
I read an interesting story, I think it might have been on your website, where you mentioned you were looking at doing a country style album about 20 years or so ago, but couldn't find enough songs on country radio at the time that inspired you to do that. Was it easier to find the material this time around?
Yeah, I mean, when this happened, Jimmy Bowen just sent me out to listen to country radio, and this was the 80s.
Yeah.
When nothing was happening in any genre, really. Although, oddly, a couple of the tunes I picked, I think, came out of that era. And I couldn't find, he didn't say find country tunes that you like. He said find tunes that are being played on country radio that you like, and that was not possible. So when I went back over I've been compiling a list for years of songs I just would like to do. Mm. And several of them were just such stone country tunes that then I went looking at, the old country tunes. I went to see Bob Orman. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a music writer here in Nashville, and is kind of one of the acknowledged experts on country musicology, and of course has this spectacular music library. And I went over to his house and we just went through record after record. And I could have done 16 records with the tunes that I'd found that I just loved and would love to sing. So that was, since I wasn't having to be narrow within one era and one time period and one music chart, or BMI chart rather.
Yeah.
You know, that was a lot easier because there's a bunch of great tunes out there.
It must have been a very hard process of elimination, though, to weed out. Yeah.
You know, I don't know how I made the decisions. I think I kind of went with the first things, the things that were on my list, and the first things that really turned me on. And even as we were recording, I was still coming up with more tunes that I thought, oh God, I would love to have done this, but we can only do 10 or 11. So that's how it shook down.
Bringing songs together from different sources, as you've done with this record, how do you go about deciding which songs sit nicely alongside other songs when sequencing a record like this?
I don't do that, and in fact, that's really a good question because, in fact, sequencing was just a bitch. And, you know, I went back and forth with David, the label guy, you know, because he had his ideas on how it should be. I had my ideas. Mike, my producer, had his ideas. One of my singers threw Becky Russell, who's in Memphis, she threw in a sequence. You know, it was very difficult because I didn't think about that, and David told me early on, but I didn't care. Well, there's an awful lot of ballads on this record, but I love ballads. If I had my way, I would do an entire record of ballads, but that doesn't work as far as, you know, listening, sequencing goes. And so it was very, very difficult to put together a coherent flow on this record.
I'd say it's been successful though, because it doesn't come across as a random selection of songs. It does flow beautifully.
Well, great. That's you know, that's how my whole life goes. It's how I decorate my house, you know, which I don't do. You know, I just throw things together and keep playing with them till they work. In nature, you know, you can go out and pick flowers for, you know, an hour with no thought to it, just picking what's out there, and you can put them together into, this is really a little more what's literate than I intended to be with this answer, but you can, what's the word I'm looking for? Allegorical?
Yeah.
But you can take flowers and put them together in any order and, you know, just keep looking at it till it looks right, and nothing doesn't go with anything else. You know, they all work. So I think music is probably the same. You just kind of go for what feels all right to you, and then it's got to work.
Tell us about the studio you recorded at. It was once home of Jim Reeves, I believe.
Yeah. I thought somebody was knocking at the door, but it's the dog scratching. It was an old ranch-style house, or, you know, 50s ranch-style house, and that a friend of ours who's, always been a real imaginative, good engineer, he had bought, and he put the studio in the basement of the house. It wasn't a studio when Jim Reeves had it, although the tiles on the floor have these big musical notes in them, so he must have used it in some musical fashion. And that was, you know, we didn't know that when we picked a studio. We went over there and looked at it because we'd heard some good stuff that had come out of there. And it wasn't until we pretty much made up our minds. He said, oh, but, you know, when we looked at the musical notes, we said, did you put those in there? And he said, no, that was here when I bought the place, and it used to be Jim Reeves' house, so that's how we do that. And I don't think I would have thought to do a Jim Reeves tune otherwise, but that just seemed like we had to do that.
It must have been a wild feeling recording one of his songs in the house he used to live in,
It was the first song that we did.
Really?
In fact, I wanted it to be the first song on the record, and I capitulated to David on that, but yeah, it was quite evocative.
Now, recording was done over a period of just a couple of days. Is that how you like to record, nice and quick?
Oh yeah, sure. When you're doing tracks, you know, it took a lot longer to finish the record. I mean, but the basic tracks we did, you know, in a couple of days, and that's really the best way to do it. And also, you know, this is a small label. We had a small budget, so I think the budget on this record was about a third of the budget on my first country record, and that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So we were really doing this on a shoestring, so that was a factor. But also, these are very simple tunes, and, you know, I don't believe in, you know, in hammering a song. If you don't get something really that you really like in a couple of takes, you just go on to something else. I mean, you know, it's not going to happen. And, you know, you just pick really good musicians and try not to have anything be too terribly complicated. And, you know, then you can get it in a couple takes. And it gives you that nice kind of live feel, too, where it isn't all clinical and intellectualized to death.
Now, many of the musicians on here you've worked with in the past on previous recordings. You didn't feel the need, even though you were recording in a different style this time, to use different musicians. Obviously, these guys can play anything. Yes.
When you're in Nashville and you're a musician, if you can't do that, you can't make a living.
Yeah.
And John Gardner, who I've used on a lot of my blues stuff, he's one of the most versatile drummers I've ever worked with, and he never does anything stock. You know, what he plays on a song is so individual to him. It's just wonderful. And he played with one of the best blues bands in town, the Mike Henderson's band, which has had many, many different incarnations. But he also played with the Dixie Chicks. So he can do anything. We used a different keyboard player than I've used before, and we used a fiddle, pedal steel mandolin player that I'd never used before. But the bass player and the drummer and the guitarist also work with the Dixie Chicks, as well as a lot of blues people around town. So yeah, I already knew these guys could do this kind of stuff, and picked them for what I thought they could bring to it that might be a little different.
Let's talk about some of the songs on the record. The title track, Stranger at My Door, I believe that's one that's been in your live repertoire for quite a long time.
It had been. I hadn't done it in quite a while. But I used to perform it, and I just had never got around to recording it, and I always loved the song. And it took forever to find out who wrote it because I had the wrong title. The title's actually Stranger at My Door. Mm-hmm. And I made it longer because, especially for a title tune, on the cover, I thought that was a little too ominous. And because the song is not at all about that. I mean, it's You'll Never Be a Stranger at My Door, but the actual title is Stranger at My Door. So, and I always thought the title was Open Up the Screen Door, so that was complicated, but we got that squared away. And yeah, I've just always liked the song, and it's not necessarily terribly country, although it had been cut a couple times, I think, by country people.
Yeah.
And it was I liked it because it was a little less hardcore. I could play with it a little more within, a different style, so... And that it just became the one that was most logical for a cover shot. And I always wanted to, because of the song Salt of the Earth, that was about my neighbors, I always wanted to shoot the cover out there. And we, when we looked at the shots and we had that one where I'm standing at the front door of old Brown Hill's house, then it all came together that should be the title tune.
Yeah, speaking of that song, Soul of the Earth, it's a wonderful collaboration involving Guy Clark.
Yeah.
Tell us how all that came together.
Well, many years ago, I wrote a little story about it at my site. If you have time, go check that out. Many years ago, when I first bought my place, I was just so charmed by the country and the people in the country, and there were 3 old farmers that lived up and down the road, and they just started dying. They were very old when I bought my place, and over time they just passed on. And the last to pass was Brown Hill, who was my next door neighbor, and just the loveliest man. And I started writing a kind of a poem, and never finished it, just kind of did it for a while. And then when we were putting stuff together for this record, it just all comes at once. and this just was not coming. And, trying to tell a story, I don't know if you've ever tried to do this, but to write a story and make it rhyme is very difficult. With a poem, you're a little more free form, and I didn't worry so much about exact meter and exact rhyming. But, I just couldn't pull it together. So I thought, well, who does this better than Guy? And I went to see him. And his advice to me didn't really work, because he just said, well, you don't have to worry about rhyming. And then I went back and listened to some of his stuff, and no, he doesn't. It always kind of sounds like it rhymes, but it doesn't necessarily. But I just couldn't get away from that idea. But he helped me kind of figure out how to make it flow, and how, he just sort of went through it with me and said, what are you trying to say here? I mean, it was just really more of a mentor on this. But he also threw in a couple of excellent lines. One was gravity and a tractor are a recipe for disaster, and the other was, old Claudia had a way with dynamite. I mean, they were just great lines. And then when it came to the last verse about my neighbor, who I just loved so much, I brought in Alice Newman, who I had known since before she was born. She was her mother was my best friend. They were my next door neighbors out in the country. And Alice had always been interested in music, and now has become a singer and a songwriter, and is just really talented. And she's since married and has lives farther away. But I kind of got together with her and said, we need to write something about Brown that really says who he is. And she loved this man. I mean, she grew up, he was like her grandfather. And so she helped me, pretty much wrote the verses about Brown Hill. I wrote, I think, the first part of it, and then she took it and ran with it. And so it just, it definitely was a group effort, and I it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I've never worked so long and so hard on a song, and I learned a lot trying to do it.
You opened the album with Cow Boogie, a song which goes way back. Where did you first come across the song?
When I first moved to Nashville, and this has nothing to do with country music, I found somewhere, I can't remember, probably at Randy's Record Mart, or one of those great places that sold, you could go in and buy any record in any genre, but they were heavy on blues and jazz. It was either Randy's or I forget what the other one was. And I found a 78 of Ella Fitzgerald and the Ink Spots doing Cow Boogie. So I bought that and brought it home, and I just loved that song from that point on. I didn't know that it had been done by like Ella Mae Morris, I believe. As it was pretty much an early country and western swing thing. And I think the Judds also did it, which I didn't know until I decided to do the song, and I thought, well, it was long enough ago, I can still do it again. And to me, it's western swing with a little jazz in it, but a lot of people kind of say, well, it's kind of weird. You do a country record and you start out with cow, but no weirder than anything else I've ever done.
Just wonderful to hear Don Gibson's "Oh Lonesome Me" done Cajun style. How did that arrangement come about? Well,
oddly, we almost didn't do it. We'd finished tracking. The guys had actually packed up, and I'd forgotten that I meant to do that song. It was just, like I say, we had done it in 2 days. It was either bring everybody back for a third day for one song, or just end up with what we ended up with. But last minute I said, Jesus, just get the bass out. Byron had already packed up his upright in his case, and said, get the bass out, we're going to try this one song. And so we just wrapped it off in about 4 minutes, however long the song took. And it was, it was fun because we were taking it very seriously, and so that was a total kind of last minute thing, and it came out pretty good.
Sure did. You're obviously very.
I do that song in my show. Now I try to put in a couple things from the record, but still I'm still just mostly doing blues gigs, but I throw that song in and people love it.
Yeah.
There's not a person in the audience who doesn't respond to that song. It's really interesting.
As always, you're obviously very intent on not wanting just to carbon copy the songs how they had known mostly to people. Did a lot of the arrangements work themselves out in the studio itself, or did you go in with the arrangements already set?
I went in with the Cow arrangement and probably Stranger, because it's Cow I just had in my head for so long, and Stranger I'd been performing. Let me think. Everything else, pretty much, we played the records for the guys. I urged them to not try to copy the original, which they didn't need to be told anyway, because they're just all great, really creative guys. And Salt of the Earth, I was pretty much directed how it was going to go, but they came up with an arrangement that was so unique and not at all what I had heard in my head. So most of the arrangements came from the guys themselves.
Now, you mentioned there were so many other songs you could have done. Could this be the start of more country projects for you?
I don't know. Certainly not immediately. My plan from this point on, and really from the prison, live at the prison record on, is to do things I've never done before.
Uh-huh.
Or at least that I haven't done to death. And so I've got some ideas for the next couple records, and maybe, if I'm still alive and still singing well, I'll do another country record down the line.
So you're still doing mainly blues-orientated shows? You're not looking at doing a country set?
Well, yes, see, that was two questions. So, yes, I'm still doing kind of blues-oriented shows, but I am, I'm trying to put together a few little jumps out there where I can do the country record.
Oh, fantastic.
It's a little harder because, my circuit is blues. The blues festival season is over, and people kind of expect that from me. But this has been getting good radio play, so I think I can go out and do this stuff, and people aren't going to come expecting something else. And if they do, they'll just have to lump it.
Well, congratulations on it. It's a fantastic release, and we're loving it down here.
Well, great. I don't think we've got distribution in Australia, which I think is a shame, and I don't know why they can't pull that together, but that's not my bailiwick. People can get it. We've actually sold some to Australia through the site, but I think that's the only way you can find it.
Oh, that's a shame. I'm sure there'll be a couple of distributors down here who'll be very keen on putting it out, I would have thought.
I would have thought too.
Yeah.
But as I say, that's the record label's.
Yeah.
They either haven't got an offer they want to deal with, or they just, I don't know. I don't like to think about that because it just annoys me. But you can, you can just go to tracynelson.com and find
get it online, which is easy enough, I'm sure. And
well, that's the deal.
Yeah. And what else is coming up for you?
I beg your pardon?
What else is coming up for you for the rest of this year?
Well, for now, I'm just going to do a lot of kind of radio and hopefully some TV, like, public television performances to push the record. I've got a couple of things on public radio coming up, and as I say, before it gets too terribly cold, I'm going to try to do some essentially club gigs just to do this record. I just got back from Nova Scotia, where I would like to get back to because I love it there. And like really what I just want to try, if possible, to do stuff that's fun and a little out of the ordinary, because I've just done what I've been doing for a very long time.
Sounds
so
good.
Different is better.
Terrific. Sounds good. Tracy,
I'd love to get down there, and I'm pulling every string I can. I would love to get to Australia, and I'd love to get to New Zealand. In fact, my dream is to get to New Zealand and get a Maori tattoo.
That's right. I remember you told me that the first time we spoke.
Still hadn't done it.
Still haven't got it.
No.
We should get you down here for our blues festival season. A lot of artists come down here and stay for like 2 months. For the season runs for the first 2 or 3 months of the year. And
you mean of January?
Yeah, January through to about the end of March. And festivals all around the country. You'd You'd have a great time.
Yeah, I just haven't really been able to hook up with whoever is putting those together, so that's something I should start working on probably.
I might send.
I think I could do some of this stuff at blues festivals.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I might send you some contacts.
Okay, great. And what I love to do is come into a place and use a band there because it's more fun. There's good musicians everywhere, and it's more fun. You get to know people that you didn't know otherwise. Everybody has a new take on everything, and that's my favorite thing to do. And I know there's great bands down there. So.
Sure.
I'm told there's a Maori Jimmy Reed band.
Really?
In New Zealand. Have you ever heard about that?
No, I haven't. Dude, that'd be worth seeing. Charlie
Musselwhite told me about that.
Oh, well, Charlie comes down here regularly. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. In fact, maybe I'll call him and see what's up. Well, this has been delightful. I appreciate you doing this.
Tracy, always a pleasure to catch up with you.